All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over CSS Subgrid. It shouldn't take too long. So this is sort of an advancement on CSS Grid, and I've been waiting a little while to make this video because the browser support wasn't great for a while. But as of 2023, it has pretty good support across most of the major browsers. So that's why we're doing it. But it solves some problems that you'll see. So I'll probably give you guys links to some of these articles if they're still around, but basically what happens is with CSS Grid is if you have rows and tracks on a parent grid, they can only be used on direct children of the grid. So if you have nested grids, they can have problems lining up. So what happens is you might have something like this where you have these cards, right? And then you've got different lengths of these headings here and then different lengths of content. And then things don't line up horizontally because each card is kind of its own little world, right? It's making its own grid, basically. So they're not talking to each other. They don't know. They're in their little silos. They're clicky, right, with themselves. I guess that doesn't make sense. But if you use Subgrid, then you can basically share the master grid. So you create a grid on the outside container, and then you can share those grid lines and rows, and then things will start to line up and looks a little bit better, right? This feels like it's just not that organized, and this feels a bit more organized. It does work fine without using Subgrid if everything is the same height, basically. Usually it's height. Doesn't have to be height, but usually it's height. So if you look at our original card video, if you saw that, everything was the same height, all the wording was the same, and the elements are the same height, so it all lined up. But once you start to add more content, it doesn't really work correctly. Here's another example. This is a code pen, and I've commented out the subgrid and the rows in the subgrid, and you can see how you've got a heading here. This one has 2 lines on it, so it pushes things down a little bit. Then different lengths of body content here, so things are kind of stretching out because they're all working on their own. They're not really talking to each other. So if I uncomment this, you'll see, and then we're just adding 2 lines here, basically. And then we're making sure that we're making a grid on that on the master or the parent container that is going through all of them. So if I inspect this here, now they're all lining up, right? The headings are lining up, the content or the text here is lining up, the buttons are lining up. If I inspect that, and then you can do this in the inspector, right, in Chrome and Firefox, probably others too. But if I go to layout and I can show, let me get out of the mobile view, that would help. And then I'll show the cards container, and you see that there's the lines, there's the row tracks that are being used there. And then the sedans is using the same one, the SUVs is using the same one, and the extremely luxurious cars are using it. If I comment that out again, let's see what happens. I'll turn that off. And now you can see things aren't lining up. And if I look at the, let me inspect this again. It's reflowing here. If I look at sedans, there's the grid for sedans. Here's the grid for SUVs, and here's the grid for extremely luxurious. Those do not line up. You can see they're all over the place, right? Because they're all doing whatever they think is normal, whatever they are doing in their own grid, and that's an auto grid, I think, on this one. So that's one example. Here's another little illustration of it. So like I said, if things are the same height, you're fine. You don't really need this subgrid because things are just going to stack the same height and you're going to be fine. As soon as you add a little bit more content in one of those content areas, you've got things starting to get pushed down and now they're out of alignment, which is not the end of the world, but it just doesn't look that great and it doesn't feel as organized, right? So here is the file. Here's the file we're going to look at. And this is sort of using some of the cards that we did before. Maybe you saw that video, maybe you didn't. But you can see that we have the images are all the same height, so that's lining up. But then some of these headings here are different heights, different amounts of text, so that's making them different height, and it's pushing down the text content. The text content has different heights. So things are kind of just stacking up wherever they want to go. If I inspect this one, you can see where the, let's see where the grid is. There's the grid on that one. And then here's the grid on that one, and here's the grid on that one. So they're not lining up. It's a little hard to see with those colors, but they're not lining up because the content is different heights, basically. So let's fix that. It's not going to be very hard. It's kind of cool. Hopefully you have this file. I will try to give you this file. It's the start file for this. And you can see, just to explain what's going on again, so we've got the Planet Cards container, which is the master container, the parent container for everything. It is called Planet Cards. Let me inspect one more time just so you guys know what's going on here. So I'm going to go to, here's Planet Cards. You can see it has a grid on it. And then each of the individual cards have a grid on them. But they're kind of acting independently, even though they have the same styles. Because the grid, CSS Grid, is adjusting the grid based on the content, which is what it's supposed to do. So that's what's going on. We got Planet Cards with a grid, and then we have each of these cards has a grid as well. So what we're going to do then, so here's the master container, or the parent container. Let me get this out of the way so we can see both a little bit. Yeah, that'll be good enough, I think. So it's got auto columns. That's why we're getting different columns. You probably saw that in the other CSS Grid card video. And then there's a little gap between. That's just the space there. Here is each of the cards. Each of the cards has a class of Planet 1. So that is what is going on in each of these cards. There's one column, right? It's one column. And then the rows are auto, min content, auto, and auto. So auto is the size of the image. Min content is this one. It probably would be the same if I put auto again. This is auto and this is auto. But they're not lining up because auto means use the content as your guide and kind of move things around. So things are moving around on their own. So really all we have to do then is change a couple things. So what we're going to do is go up here and add grid template rows on the master parent container. So I actually can just use these. So I'm just going to take this, copy it, and I'm going to go up to Planet Cards, and I'll just put it at the bottom for simplicity's sake here, and I'll paste that in. Probably nothing will happen because it's doing the same rows. It's the same settings there. So you might not see anything happen yet. But now all we have to do now is go down into Planet 1, and we're going to change grid template rows, this auto, min content, auto, auto. We're going to change that to subgrid. And we got a bad problem. Everything is broken. Why is it broken? Because we now have all of these items in the first, or they're all falling into the same row. So they're all overlapping each other, basically. So that's why it feels like it's everything stacked, because it is. Everything is in the same row from the master column. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. I don't know if this might be a little too confusing, but if I go to subgrid here, and I'm going to turn on the Planet Cards grid. That's the Planet Cards grid. You can see there's the Planet Cards grid. Everything is going into that first row, and then there's other rows below that. So they're all just stacked on top of each other. We can fix that pretty easily though. So what we're going to do then is we have to tell Planet 1 that it is going to span 4 rows, not 1 row. So we're just going to go down. Let's go right here, I guess, before the background color. And we're going to say grid row span 4. And what we're doing there is we're telling the browser that these cards are going to span 4 rows in this grid. This one up here, which is these 4 rows right here. Those are the same 4 rows. So if we look back at there, did that fix it? Hey, it's fixed. Not too bad, right? Let me refresh that to get rid of those lines. So now you can see, whoops, maybe I didn't get rid of the lines. I guess I can't get rid of the lines. There we go. So now you can see that this is in the first row of the master parent grid. The parent grid is out here, and this is in the second row, and this is in the third row, and this is in the fourth row. Now everything's lining up. You do have negative empty space, but there's really nothing you can do about that because you have different amounts of content, right? You could move things around in these grid items, these cells, but yeah, we're gonna go with it the way it is, and now everything's kind of sized the same. You can see it's the second row is acting differently because, because of the way that it's reflowing. If I get it all in the same row, you'll see that it will adjust. So it's adjusting based on the row. So because the grid is starting again right here because it's not fitting. So that's a little bit different, right? See, this is higher than this. So that is a little bit of a little quirk to that. But if they're all in the same row, they're all going to be the same, right? So I hope that made a little bit of sense and will help a little bit. It's not too tough. It can get a little bit tricky, but it is a way to help align things, especially cards. That's kind of the classic example, but you can use this on any parent container and then have those grid lines and those grid rows and columns from the parent container go into each of the nested grids, basically. So I hope that helps a little bit, and I will talk to you again later.